What's up, guys? Welcome to episode 5 of the Be Better podcast. Nate Lecker here with a good buddy of mine, Shaun Scott, the one, the only. How you doing, Shaun?
Excellent. So grateful to be here. Thanks for having me on, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, man. I know we had some crazy scheduling things this morning with a couple things coming up on my end, so I appreciate you being flexible with me. You're the best as always. So the people out
Gymnast,
there,
flexible.
you got it, brother. The people out there that might not know you as well as I know you, right? Could you give me the quick, 1,000-foot view of Shaun Scott? What does he do? What makes him what motivates him? Kind of take you from conception to where you are now. Maybe not
Yeah,
conception, maybe a little farther out, but close enough.
that's all right. Yeah, I was a twinkle in my father's eye. No, I don't know. I like to say I just kind of Forrest Gump my way through life. So I really have no chill. I wind up getting my hands in a lot of buckets. But the thing that kind of got me where I'm at is I was going into it. I'm a fifth generation gymnast here out of St. Louis. My brothers and I were all former national champions. And in our adult lives, that's opened up a lot of cool doors. You know, I've run American Ninja Warrior. All three of us have done Guinness World Records. Older brother was second on the Titan Games. We've done a lot of film, X, Y, Z, etc. And then I guess, two with that, I want to touch. Former professional cage fighter, held a belt here locally, regionally through the Shamrock promotion. I'm trying to think. I'm trying not to go too in depth here, but I'm currently an IT solutions consultant, and I work really across the board with a number of high entities nationally.
That's awesome, man. So obviously I've known you for a long time, since probably 2015,
No.
2016, right? So I know quite a bit about you, man, but I want to dive into, because I've always thought you're an interesting person. For the record, you were the first person who I ever saw do a backflip standing up. So the first day I met you, we were in the office there, and somebody was, Shaun, I heard you do a backflip. And you're like, oh, yeah. And there you are, on the floor, just out of backflip. We're like, God, this guy's fucking nuts. I was
Keep
like,
that thing on me.
right? So, I've always been just really impressed by you, man. I think you're a great dude. So once again, thank you for being on here. I've never really got to talk to somebody who's been an elite gymnast like yourself, right? I've never even thought about that. Growing up, me playing contact sports, as most people do, I don't even think about gymnastics, right? I never realized, I'm like, oh, gymnastics is kind of feminine, whatever. And then I get older and I look at these guys, and I'm like, these gymnasts are in the best shape out of any athletes out there, and it's more physically grueling than any other sport. I mean, you guys are dominant, man. So tell me a little bit of background about. I guess it's in your blood, so you don't really have a choice but to be good at it. But tell me a little bit more about how the training is, what's the physical impact on that, and just tell me about the events and what you really loved about
Yeah, sure. And two, like you were saying, I was kind of forced into it. I never really appreciated it until I was really a man. The opportunities that it's presented to me and the doors that it's opened and the things that it's incorporated in my life to just keep me healthy, fit, active. Um, I was always like running away from the gym, but I'll give you the origin story with that. So yeah, I'm a fifth generation gymnast out of St. Louis through the Sokol organization. Came to St. Louis in 1865. It was created in Czechoslovakia to create a non-religious and non-political institution to create a healthy, fit populace. Done stints as the men's director there at that point. But so that's my maternal line. And then my father was a professional gymnast, high diver. He moved to St. Louis because the Six Flags had a high diving show. So he, had a standing gig. He didn't have to travel to do any shows. And my mom was the head coach at the Olympiad program here in St. Louis. If anyone's familiar with, it's a small community. And then my father was the head coach at Gym Center, and they fell in love and they started a gym. And I grew up, I'm 2 months old. My dad's got me in his hands doing a double backflip, or whatever. I remember as a kid here in St. Louis, the first time I ever went to Shaw Park, it was like, and you got to go off the 5-meter, platform, and you got to go off the 3-meter diving board, and it was just kind of expected of me as a kid, and I really didn't like it. My brothers always say oh, we pushed you and we toughened you up and everything. And it's undeniably the case. But I'm like, man, there were times when I did not want to do things, and it forced me to kind of push myself and challenge myself. And that's something that I've really, as an adult, leaned into. Like if I can identify a fear or something that now I've got to do it. I've got to overcome that thing. Skydiving, whatever. And it's something that I've really appreciated as a coach, being able to work with other athletes and individuals, because in gymnastics, there's 6 events, for the men, uh, bars, pommel horse, etc., the vault, and there's something on each of those events because it's a logical progression. All of acrobatics is like a order of operations: elevate, then rotate, then twist. And you don't even like they used to code it. If you twisted one way, they would count it as one skill, and if you twisted the other way, they would count it as a distinct skill. But they don't do that anymore. So you only need to learn to twist one way. And when you simplify it down like that, it's so easy to communicate. There's a guy named Greg Rowe, that I really appreciate having a friendship with. He's a former Canadian Olympian, and he is now potentially getting freestyle gymnastics and trampolining into like more of the Olympic and accredited sports as a result of disseminating all of this training material and saying, listen, lowering the barrier of entry. So it's not just rich kids who can do it, but like anybody who can apply themselves and find some kind of training facility. But yeah, so I'm a gymnast. And
No big deal, right?
it really factors in my life. So I was just thinking this morning, there's this handbook that they wrote in 1865 that I never cracked, because it's a bit of a dry read until I went to our instructor's course. And until 2005, United States Gymnastics didn't have a sanctioning like instructor body. So our Sokol program was the only one in the country where all these coaches would come and we would train them through like hands-on spotting training development, all the coaching, like progressions and fundamentals of theory and practice. And I read it, and like the way that it defines gymnastics is any system of bodily movements with any like piece of apparatus. So when you think about it in that broad context, kung fu is gymnastics, or basketball is gymnastics, because we do, acrobatic gymnastics, rhythmic gymnastics, all of it. So I've got a lot of circus friends who say I'm not a gymnast. I'm like, oh, you're a gymnast. That counts. I don't know. It's interesting. And two, back to that like book, they wrote down, because they used to do the mass calisthenics in Europe, and they couldn't communicate that. They didn't have the video chat. So they had to figure out a way to make sure this group of 100 people was doing the same thing as this group of 100 people, because they get them into Strahov Stadium in Prague is like 8 soccer fields long. They had to invent like a new Klipschorn and series of acoustics to try and make sure the sound was hitting everybody right, and everybody's doing the right movements, whatever that is. And it's interesting to me personally, because growing up I was forced to learn how to march like in formation, and I was forced to learn how to do calisthenics. And calisthenics was like, front lunge, up arm, and we just do kind of all these like slow things to music. And like as a young man, we all hated it. We were like, this is so lame. But when you look on YouTube now, it's like all these influencers are like, oh, they're doing calisthenics, and they do like a front lever. They'll do like, like planche stuff. And I'm like, that's not even the cool stuff. Like they're not even flipping.
Right.
But because of the way that they've realized that it interacts with your body, like everybody's got a bar they can get to somewhere. If you're doing pull-ups, you're getting a lot of work out of that. And if you can't do pull-ups too, just another side tidbit, my brothers and I were all international strength and conditioning coaches. I'm a former professor of the NASM certification program there. And eccentrics, when you're going down, like if somebody can't do a strict form pull-up, you can sure jump up there and then like fight like hell while you're going down. Your body doesn't know the difference between those muscle sarcomers. And it actually potentially gets more of a benefit to your central nervous system, which fires up your endocrine system and your hormones and makes your body do the stuff you want to do anyway, just going down. So struggle through it going down. Your body can't tell the difference. It's getting that pressure and tension through the sarcomers, and that's what your brain reacts to. So pro tip.
That's absolutely huge. So I would tell you, I appreciate people like you and what they do when you talk about things like that, because I was very blessed. My junior and senior year of high school in Eureka, I had a weightlifting coach who was an Olympic with his name's Thomas Singer, and that dude made me the man I am. Like I was a punk, you know, hearing in my ear, talking back to everything. He was a punk kid. I mean, he was a straight douche. And that dude broke me. Like, I mean, it was like military style. Like, broke me down into, I felt like I was nothing. I mean, he was like, dude, I can kick your ass right now. And me being a 16-year-old, and I was like, bring it on. And then I walked in one day, he called me into his office. And I walked in his office attached to the weight room. And he is benching 385 pounds with his legs in. And I go, yeah. I go, I'm going to listen to everything this guy says. And the reason why I said that was because not only do I have a lot of respect for him, and he made me the man that I am today, I have a lot of me as far as my disciplines go. But he focused a lot on, like, he didn't give a shit about the guy that can go in there and bench 400 pounds. Incorrect. He didn't give one shit. It was all about like, the guy that can 180 pounds correctly, or squat 180 pounds correctly, or clean right. And we would do workouts, man. A lot of it would be calisthenics on the shelf. What we call a matted area at Eureka. And I'd say 15 minutes of our first workouts would be marching. It's so crazy. I never realized how there's an art to it, a form to it, like you said earlier, right? And the marching side of that was so beneficial just to set the tone for everything, your mental, your internal body, your position. And then we would do other calisthenics up there as well. So, I just, if anybody was ever down anything like that, there's two people here that are telling me these things are huge factors in that category. Obviously, Shaun has a lot more motivation than I do in this situation, but it's so true. So obviously, the gymnastics stuff made you into a super freak when it comes to health and fitness, right? You're a machine. You still look great. Look good then. Look good now. So when did you transition that into MMA fighting?
Yeah, and really that was the impetus. So it was a bucket list for me. In St. Louis, we have an event called Bartenders Brawl, which is boxing, kickboxing. And I went to represent Sokol, where we got a great bar next to the gymnasium. Czech beer, right? Best importer in the city, by the way. Zatek, Pilsen, Czech bar. But so I got a nice little shirt that said Sokol printed up, and I went to sign up because we tried to sign up in like college or something. So then randomly 4 or 5 years later, I'm coaching. I wasn't competing at the time as an athlete. I get the call, hey, would you like to do it? And I talked to my girlfriend at the time. I said, hey, I got this opportunity. I'd like to do it. And I cut down to 170 for the first time since high school. And that was a bad experience. And I got in a fight. Technically, I had to throw 3 kicks as a kickboxing match for it to be legal. And 2, it was the same thing. Like I'm a roller and a puncher. You were saying like that guy humbled you in jujitsu, or like the first time you wrestle somebody who's better than you. It's like, okay, tap, tap. I need to learn from this individual, and it humbles you, like white belt mentality. But so I went into that event here. And guy's nose exploded. He bled all over me. The doctor stopped it. I almost punched him out of the ring. But they were recruiting a couple of guys from that event for a fight down in Florida. And so they said, hey, you want to do this fight down in Florida? So I talked to my girlfriend again, and I was like, hey, I got another opportunity. Do you mind if I do that? And she gave me her okay, free vacation. Why not? And the funny bit of that one is, before the fight, a couple weeks out, the main event pulled out, but I was the same weight. So they said, you can fight the guy we planned for you to fight, or you can fight in the main event. This kid, he's a 2-time state champ down in Florida, wrestling, all that other stuff. I didn't exactly ask the girlfriend on that one, but I thought, I've got to do it.
Yeah.
So yeah, so we go down there. I went down there with 3 other local guys, and they didn't bring us down to win. They didn't pull me in to the main event to fight their star student and knock him out in 30 seconds and do my first backflip on the mat, and then the rest is history. I came back up to St. Louis, and the Shamrock organization started calling. Didn't quit calling. Great relationship at this point, and some experiences of I'll have for the rest of my life. But truthfully, going into that, I was just being a gymnast. Hey, I'm a good athlete. I know that I can do well at this. and then apply myself in some small facet.
Yeah, definitely. So it almost sounds like in that situation, like homecoming football games, right? You always play a team that you're just going to beat the shit out of. You're going to beat them 58 to nothing to get them motivated. That almost is like what it seems like they try to do with you, but it backfires. So, right? So they try to have somebody random who's maybe not as experienced in the octagon as their state champ or whatever, and you go in there and knock his ass out in 30 seconds. I mean, that's not a good
Once
knock
it's
for
a
yourself,
chance.
but that just shows that pure determination and will always outbeat, if the deck is against you, right? So that's awesome. So I wanted to touch base with you. So MMA, to me, I know it's for you, it's more important to you than just to me, of course, but I actually started training at the gym in January. And, I boxed as a kid at South Broadway Athletic Association, did some things there, great spot. But, that was like 9 and 10. So I took a hike when I was 26, almost 27, I was there now. And yeah, if I could recommend anything to anybody who ever listens to this, like if you do not practice a martial art or an MMA style or even boxing, get into one of those gyms, I think is much better than weightlifting. I mean, I'll go to the gym and I lift weights and it's okay, and I get to do the workout, whatever. But like being in a room that could kill you if they wanted to, there's nothing you could do about it, but you're learning from them the whole time. There's something magical about it. And I don't go as often as I should. I used to go when I first started going. I would go like 3 or 4 times a week. And now since the wedding's getting close, I can make any excuse I want. I've been going like once a week maybe. Um, but just being in that environment, I would say 99, and you probably agree with this. 99% of the people that are in those gyms are the nicest, sweetest, helpful dudes ever because it's a community, it's a bond, it's a brothership or a brotherhood, I should say. And everybody that I've had the honor of meeting, from the owner himself, who's a pro fighter who retired, to the guys that are up and coming that are doing well with their records, right? Everybody's just been super helpful, and not only have I learned a lot of things as far as self defense goes, and as far as like training goes, being a better person, but I've also learned a lot about just like I don't even know how to explain it, man. Like just treating your body right, and I think having that, and not even on the physical side, but just the mental side too, right? There's something magical to be said about going in there and rolling on the mat with somebody for an hour and a half and getting your shit kicked in it. There's something beautiful about that at the end when you're driving home, you're all sweat and you're beat up and your body feels like it's broken, but you're feeling stronger for some reason, right? So I know you've probably experienced that feeling quite a bit. Could you please just tell me a little bit more about maybe like the feelings that you get after a big win or like after you train or things like that? And also, I know you said you're a ground and strike guy, right? Have you ever thought about going into like a Muay Thai deal, or is that really not?
Say that again.
I was like, I know you're more of a ground and strike, which I think is the most entertaining to watch. I'm more of a stand-up striker because I don't know, I'm just not flexible like you. But I was also curious. Have you ever thought about trying out the Muay Thai side of that?
Yeah, I mean, you've got to train all of it. I've got, um, I've ended fights with elbows. But it's interesting just talking about yourself going into the gym, and I've thought about it with gymnastics a lot because the Sokol organization is more like recreational gymnastics as opposed to competitive, like highly competitive elite gymnastics. And what I've seen in my experience as a coach is the people who tend to go the least far in gymnastics or whatever get the most out of it because those are lessons that you wouldn't get anywhere else in life, and you have exposure to those environments. You're a product of the room that you're in. Um, you know, and with that, if you're going in there and you walk in that room, and every one of those guys, I do like the Joe Rogan quote where someone says, "Hey, what's the importance of jujitsu?" And he's like, "Well, if we got into a fight, I would kill you." You know,
100%.
that interacts with your psychology as much or more so as it does with your physiology, and that creates a specific adaptation to an imposed demand. Um, and it's definitely an interesting thing to where you're pushing yourself, you're moving forward in these things, and you win or you improve or you die. No, you win or you learn, is the thing, right? If you're not losing, you're not fighting the right guys, that kind of stuff. And it you touched on a good thing. It's like 90% of these guys are you run into two kinds, especially in fighting. It's like I'm guys who have a chip on their shoulder, guys who are maybe angry, don't have another outlet for that constructively, and then other people who are just going to diligently apply themselves to a process and a progress. And whether that's a traditional martial art with a belting system, or whether that's someone who's just going to get into his comfort zone through some facet or means and try and through that build some growth. Growth happens outside of our comfort zone. um, with enough of that though, I've gotten the opportunity to like I said, we worked together, and I loved it because I came from coaching gymnastics, being a head coach at a gym, going and doing camps nationally, doing a lot of just different training and development programs, working with hundreds of athletes and everything. So when I went into sales, I was like, all right, but these meetings you guys run, that's like I'm the guy. Like let me get up there and run the mic, and then get everybody engaged, and then I'll do a backflip and whatnot. So it was such a neat opportunity to be able to run, be in the lead of some of those company wide meetings, 2 weeks in, and try and be able to translate that into it. And yeah, with the fighting, it's like you win a title belt. I say it's cool to wear those belts for one night, and then it's got to go on the wall. But for that one night, you can fit three tall aluminum Budweisers in that bad boy and all night.
Yeah.
Um,
You're king of the
so that,
castle for that one night. I get it.
that's what I like. I've always liked. I'm a pacifist. A jujitsu instructor, Brian Gidry, one of the Vagi guys, he likes to call me the pacifist. But violence is not a valid form of conflict resolution. I don't get angry or whatever, so I'm not like, oh, I'm gonna kill that guy, or I'm not gonna, try and speak to his detriment or anything like that. I'm gonna shake his hand beforehand. I'm gonna buy him a beer afterwards, but I'm gonna do a backflip, and I'm gonna crush some whiskeys with my friends. Bill Burr does a great bit where he says, I'm on stage every day, but there's nothing like, the lights go down and spotlight and they say, Shaun, the Gladiator. And it's like, yeah, that's fucking great. And then, like I've been to Tony Robbins, walked the coals with him, and one of his proteges, Robert McClendon. He says, when you walk into a room, walk into a room like this, and put yourself in that state, that resourceful state, that state where you feel empowered, and tap into that. And for people who have never gotten that, find something where you can tap into that. And for me, having had those experiences, that's something where, hey, I have a sales meeting that goes a little weird, or somebody decides they don't like me and they're honking at me in traffic and whatnot. I can let that roll off, and I can kind of move forward as a result of literally having those experiences. Or like you said, hey, somebody said you could do a backflip, and I crush a backflip just because I keep it on me. I have the ability to do that, and I work with these young kids, and once they can do a standing backflip, as a young man, when you walk into a bar and you can crush a backflip for a beer, I did that a lot as a kid, but it gives you that certain like floor of confidence where I've at least got this amount of confidence and I can approach life with that.
Yeah, man. Like I said, I loved you from the minute I met you. I was like, this dude is a fucking awesome dude. Positive energy. I have known you since 2016ish. Never seen you mad. Never seen you bitch. Never seen you complain. I know you're human, so I know it comes. But yeah, I think you handle it a lot better than most. And you said something that I really want to touch on is confidence. Um, you know me. I'm an egotistical maniac. Sometimes I'm a confident guy. I walk in the room and automatically think I'm the smartest guy in there. Not always my best trait, but at least I have that initial confidence to kind of be ignorant in that regard. But one thing you said that I want to really, really focus on is like I think a lot of people nowadays show they lack confidence, and I think it's due to a lot of factors. I think the generation of us are being conditioned to not really be confident. I think they're conditioned to be submissive, right? And I've seen this other times in other episodes and things. But I think people younger than us are being taught to be submissive, and that it's okay to feel scared. It's okay to be fearful, and it's okay to not back up yourself. Whereas you got a guy like yourself who you're in your 30s and all you do is fight your fears every day. Right? You're out there, bucket list. I want to go be a pro fighter, so I became one. Hey, bucket list. I wanted to be an elite gymnast, so I became one. I wanted to become an entrepreneur, so I opened my own business. I wanted to skydive, so I fucking did it. You know, like all these things that are terrifying to most people. I mean, you knocked them out before you're 40, and you did them all very well, right? So I would think if this message gets to anybody out there, right? Like if you're having issues with confidence, one, get involved in a martial art because I promise you your confidence will go up. Mine did. Shaun, you live that. Um, like I said earlier, there's something magical about practicing something like that that's so technique driven, but you're getting a good workout. You're with other people that are literally struggling and dying just as you are, right? Because everybody's hurt when you're on the mat. It sucks for everybody, right? Even the guy that's winning, he's still putting out a lot of physical, effort to make it happen. So everybody's struggling out there, and you feel better after. But also too, I love what you said about coming into the room, like walking into the room with that noise you made. I'm not going to redo it, but the noise you made is huge, right? Like people go into rooms of large people and they hide and they cower and they go to the corner or they stand by the juice bar or the water cooler, whatever the hell it is, and that doesn't do anybody anything, right? Because you never know on the other side of that room could be your next opportunity that's going to change your life. You can meet somebody that's going to be revolutionary to you, and maybe you guys both side out everything, you start a business together, and it's the next Microsoft or the next Apple product, right? Whatever it is, right? But you have to have that confidence to feel comfortable in those situations. So I love that you said that. I think people really lack that in this world, and I just wish that people could find a little stronger foundations to have that natural confidence. I'm not saying walk in the room and be like fucking Randy Savage, right, and kick over a table and whatever. But I am saying, like, go into a room and be ready to be confident. Be ready to feel comfortable. Be ready to make those connections and meet those people. And I read a book last year. And I can't remember the name. It was a short. It was more of a passage than anything, but a book. It was like 40 pages. But they said like if you really want to get over your fears, do them often. Like if you're scared of snakes, handle snakes often. If you're scared of driving a car, drive a car often. Get practice, get good at it, right? And I think there's a lot of things out there that people are scared of that they would just get over it if they just did it. I mean, you talked about diving off diving boards, right? I mean, all of us as little kids, man, we're always scared to dive off the diving boards the first time. But what happens? We dive off the first time, everything's okay. And now every time you go back to that pool, what are you doing? First thing, what are you doing? You're jumping off the diving board, right? So you're conditioning yourself to fight that fear and be like, oh, this isn't that big of a deal. I can do this. It's not going to kill me. I know how to react to it. I know how to handle it. I know how to do X, Y, Z with it. So I love that you said that, man. I appreciate you saying that. It's always good to get another professional opinion like you or like yours, where people can understand that, because I think you lack it quite a bit. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think you touched on a number of different things there. It's a human psychological, like, ingrained component that will have that self-doubt, and that, people at the top have imposter syndrome where they're like, I don't am I the guy who should be in the seat, whatever, like in fighting, it's like, all right, now we're throwing punches. You figure it out real quick.
Right.
But there's a lot of gray area there where people really have trouble finding their space, or feeling confident in a room. And it's an interesting thing where, if people, the other side of the coin is people will be overconfident, or they'll be aggressive, or they'll get emotionally attached to, like, what they feel as their ego in their frame that they're holding. And then they'll create conflicts because they want to be, like, the man in the room. And the way I try and think about it is, like, because I want to be in a room with people I hold in high regard, and I consider a better me in aspects, right? Mark Twain said, every man is my better in some one thing, and it's my job to figure out what that is so I can potentially learn from them, no matter who it is.
100%.
But I like to try and think of it as, like, if I was like the Punisher and this is the Justice League, I don't have superpowers, but I'm going to stand over here and, play my part, whatever it is, because I want to be in a group of strong, competent individuals who are able to affect their environment and create some change where there needs to be maybe change. But to the extent of working into a martial art or something like that, there's a lot of psychosomatic bleed over, the brain body connection. People who are intelligent, I'll tell my fiance, don't forget that you have a body, like, get in your body. And the opposite side, the people who are, really mentally applied, find a time to give yourself some freedoms to tap into that flow state where you're not, if you're surfing or you're longboarding and you're thinking about your bills, you are no longer surfing or longboarding, you are falling. So you need to be able to tap into that, and it frees our brain to create space for growth. We're designed to work like that. But specifically, whatever martial art it is, anything like that. I like jujitsu because you're not getting punched in the face, tap, tap, we're good. And I'll tell people young and old, get into this because that framework of progression and steady application towards small achievable goals to build that success, that's what helps build that confidence. If you don't want to, say, give a public speech, don't start out, you're not going to speak to an arena of people, but feel comfortable maybe taking the floor and making a point at, maybe not too argumentative, I was going at like family Thanksgiving. It's like, maybe don't be that guy, politics or religion,
Sure.
but be able to like competently speak to something. And then that's a success, or like if you're in karate, you break a small board, that's a success, and continue to break larger boards, crawl, walk, run, figure out wherever you are. And it's stressful, it's hard, but it's there are two types of stress, right? Eustress and stress. Like, if it can be detrimental to you if you let it be that way, but if you can conceptualize it and maintain the perspective that I'm trying this thing. Like, I've done a lot of stuff. I picked up the guitar a lot since I was a kid. Not good. But if I think, okay, I'm going to get better at this every time I do it. I hated basketball. I played 3 years of little league basketball when we quit gymnastics, and I think I shot the ball one time. I just didn't like to do it. But at this point, I'll put a roof on anybody because I've played enough basketball. I try to learn every time I'm playing it how to, work to my own body, my own, skill set, and improve there. And that's a big thing, to build a progression of confidences to where maybe then I can walk into a avenue or an experience that I'm not comfortable with. And I know that I can overcome that because, in jujitsu, we say you have to be comfortable being uncomfortable. You have to kind of lay that out and have that beginner's mind mentality where you're learning from that experience as it's happening and trying to, take those lessons. And that's how they kind of formulate in yourself. It's a very interesting thing, but if you continue to grow there, I used to get poked fun at it. It's like, okay, if you want to do all these things, you're going to be a jack of all trades, master of none. But it's like, listen, I'm planning to live for a long time. If I continue to learn as I go through these experiences, I've got 10,000 hours to put into a couple of different buckets. I can be pretty competent across a number of different fields of practice. And that's it, and if you can learn to apply yourself there, it's never fun changing these things, but you can get tied to, okay, that's going to bring about these positive changes in my life. And that's so good. It's funny, you were talking about, if you're afraid of snakes, I got a snake in college, and I would keep my wallet and my keys in there. And it was cool until I was like late for class, and the snake was on my wallet, and I'd be like, keys. But I'm not afraid of it. And I feel confident going into situations at this point where especially if it's an experience I haven't had before. I'm a collector of those experiences, and I really want to do it.
Yeah, you're talking about the snake there. Reminds me of God bless man, Talladega Nights. You know what I'm talking about? When the puma in the car, like
Yeah,
it's just,
of course.
like he's like, you gotta learn how to drive with the fear. You know what I mean? And that's he's got a fucking puma in his car and he's racing. And then at first he's getting scratched and bit up and everything, right? But what happens?
Yeah.
He's eventually driving with the puma and he's petting it, and then it growls. He's like, no, like we don't growl at him or whatever, right? So like it's what you just said with a snake. At first you're like, oh shit, you do that to train your brain, right, to get over the fear, and you're putting your keys in there. You're like, fuck, I'm late for class. I don't know what to do, right? I got to fight this snake or I got to maneuver around this snake to get my keys. And at the end of it, I'm sure you're like, oh hey, snake, I'm gonna grab this keys, bang, boom, out the door, right? Like it was nothing at that point. And I think
The
it's
trick is, how do I get the snake and me to both want the same thing at the
that's
same
right.
time? That's the thing, right? I'm reading I didn't realize old Churchill, he won a Nobel for his history of the English speaking people, but I'm loving going through it. And I clipped one out. I was like, in these conflicts, sometimes conflict is unavoidable, but the conflict leading up to and around that, like there's a lot that happens before something comes to blows. And the challenge there is, not between me and the other guy on the side of the table. We've got to figure out a way to be on the same side of the table. It's between us and that table. Like, how do we find that commonality, and how do we find some kind of lowest common denominator where we can identify with each other. We're all more vastly more alike than we are different. I've met people in a lot of different facets of life, and there are striking similarities between all of us in all facets of that. And what matters there is the perspective that we take into something that affects that outcome as it's happening to, create some magic or some kind of designated purpose. And then from that, how do you take that lesson? Is that a lesson? Like, you know, are you reading the book to get a grade and get it done, and then you're not going to retain that information? Or you're taking that to heart and you're trying to improve as an individual and self-actualize? And even that is scary for people, like, I bought an ice cream shop in the middle of COVID winter when no one was allowed to go in the front door. Candidly, I was looking for a multifamily there, but it was an opportunity for me to grow. And I think it had that very express purpose. And as a result of that, it's a positive experience because I get to choose the framework there. I get to choose that success. And, they say, you can fail at doing something you don't want. So why not just try and do whatever it is you do want? And at this point, like, I'm up there playing in a band. I'm doing film. I'm doing any kind of athletic pursuit that I can give. I'm speaking on these topics professionally. Like I said, but I was not a cybersecurity guy. Now I'm giving cybersecurity speeches to city administrators, mayors, and municipalities, and it's a learning opportunity, and it's something that I can transfer aspects that I've learned from one part of my life to another part of my life to become a more complete individual and lean into that. So yeah, I like to let my weird flag fly like throughout the process. But as a result of that, I feel better with myself being more authentic there. And I feel like I'm more impactful in those interactions and the contributions that I can have in those circumstances.
Yeah, I would agree with that 100%. And like, I mean, I want to say once again, thank you so much for doing this because every sentence you're saying is just like golden nuggets of information. And although that I've known you a long time, we haven't really had a chance to have this deep dive, into conversations like this. And I'm learning a lot from you. I mean, this like, you're giving me a lot of good perspective that I've never looked at things. Right? You said something just a minute ago that I'm actually going to write down after this on this big, beautiful spiral here. But you said, many people fail at things they don't like to do, right? Why would they? Why not try the things they like to do? And if they fail, then so be it, right? That's pretty much the premise of what you said. And I'm thinking about that sitting here, like, man, like I have failed at a lot of shit that I don't like to do. Like I've never been a big in school for some reason. I always struggled with math, right? Hated fucking math. And now after school, I love math. I mean, I'm an excellent. I don't know if I could go back now and redo it, I'd get a straight A. Without a doubt. I don't know why I had a click moment for me in that subject after school. Um, but like I failed a lot at, not the classes. I passed the classes by the skin of my teeth, but I would fail a lot of like learning, and I think a lot of it was like I just didn't want to do it. I struggled at it, and it made me miserable. But not until recently did I actually like start trying to do things that I actually liked, right? And like, am I an expert at it? No, but like, dude, I can't tell you. Like, I love to fish. If anybody knows me, like, at least I fucking fish now, for God's sakes. I fish probably 2 days a week, right? If not, maybe one day a week, if not 2 days, right? And I also like property out there that I bought. And like, dude, I've been out there many times, and like, I post on social media when I catch these hogs, right, and these good fish. But what you don't see is the 4 or 5 trips that I went where I didn't catch anything. You know what I mean? But like, I'd rather fail at that than fail at something I hate doing. You know what I mean? Because I'm learning every time. Like, okay, I know from 8 to 8 or 8 to 10 p.m. they didn't bite on a crankbait. Now I can switch to a swim, or now I can switch to a senko, whatever it is, right? Adapting my strategy, my game plan. So I love that you said that, man. I've never heard it spun that way, I should say. And I think people need to just try it, right? Break down those walls and try it. Like try
So
and fail at what you like to do.
absolutely. And it's a part of a process, that stress again, that's how a muscle works. You have to break it down to build it up. And failure is a part of the process. If you look at it holistically, the master has failed more times than the beginner has even tried. If you never try and you never encompass that one failure, you'll never build to these successes. I had an interesting experience that was impactful to me in high school, from a that formed a shift in my perspective. My favorite English teacher, and candidly, in school, I was once I realized there was weighted stuff, and it was like, okay, your tests are worth tests and quizzes are 70% of your grade, homework is 30% of your grade. I was like, listen, I'm gonna try and do 9 sports this year in high school. I'm not gonna do a lick of homework, and I'll just get hundreds on all my tests
Right.
and C's, baby. Um, but my favorite English teacher, and I was in an honors AP class of his, and he's a great educator, but I'm glad that I was so engaged with him as a teacher, because we did like a little show and tell, like, as our first assignment, and anybody who didn't complete that first assignment, like, bring something that you're proud of. Like, he wanted to engage us in that state. He was like, those guys aren't for this class, and it was a high school class, but he cut 10 to 15% of those classes, and those classes were amazing. So I was like, man, I'm glad I brought in something I was proud of, because I had enough shit that I was proud of. Um, but he was a cool guy. We had a walking counselor who I didn't have a personal relationship with, but he brought into class to speak specifically because he is of the Rasta faith. And we've got like the dreadheads and the different Bob Marley stuff or whatever, but a lot of people don't know about the faith itself, specifically because as a tenant of the faith, they're not allowed to evangelize. They're never going to go out and spread the central tenets of their faith or whatever. Because they're supposed to focus on their own personal experience and journey.
And enlightenment.
So they won't talk to people about it. But and I guess high level. So the Rasta faith, they believe that Haile Selassie I, it was like another reincarnation of Jesus, and they conceptualize him as the same way as Jesus, Muhammad. Uh, all those guys are just guys, and they think about them in the perspective that maybe they came before me, but they're just guys, and they're just a guy like me. And they believe that they and all of us are lesser gods, to the extent that we have the power in our lives. And it hit me. They were like, if we have the power in our lives to create our circumstances, if you think about it from a granular level, at every single level, like, we are creating these things. So there comes a point as a man or a woman where you have to, if you can, like, take that responsibility for your life. And it's kind of a scary thing, but it's also a very freeing thing to think that we wouldn't be having this conversation, we wouldn't be touching on these topics, we wouldn't be sitting here where we are if we didn't want to do that. And in that, scaling all the way up, if I wanted to be the best guitarist in the world, I would be, because I would have put in my 10,000 hours. I would practice more diligently. My drummer's like, we need to practice more. I'm like, I'm doing other shit because I want to do other stuff, and I have to own that. But if I wanted to, I would. My dad, when I was a hefty boy. I hit 275 in high school, and then crashed, dieted it off, and wore my plastic suit to school every day. But he'd said, nobody ever forced me to eat a cupcake, and I was making every single one of those decisions, and I have to take responsibility for that. But I have the power as well to create a change in my life, and those small changes create exponential, drastic differences in your life or your situation or your perspective as they continue to compound,
Yeah. Okay. So you're gonna have to stop, because like I'm just sitting here mind blown after mind blown after mind blown with these things you're just sharing, man. I love it. Um, I agree with you. I think one thing you said that's huge, and I think a lot of people maybe nowadays don't do, is take responsibility or take accountability. Um, I've had weight issues my whole life. In high school I was in excellent shape, and before that, middle school, grade school, I was very weak. Got into excellent shape in high school, and then after high school, kind of dropped it off. Now I'm like middle of the road, I'm like 225, but I exercise. I eat relatively clean, other than the weekends I have something sweet. But for somebody who's struggling with that, like, I think one thing that I did for helping me lose weight was take accountability. Like you said, man, nobody's ever put a gun in my head and said, eat this fucking cupcake, right? Or eat this ice cream, or eat this candy, whatever it is, right? Or eat
Well,
this.
they will pressure you into drinking a beer if you tell them you're not going to, which is another thing.
That's true.
But
I don't drink, So like I was gonna touch on that. It's funny you brought that up. I was gonna touch on that same deal, man. Um, but let me finish my thought on that. Is people taking accountability for their own actions, right? I have a good friend of mine who's a Rastafarian. He's a practicing, and he's on the. I think there's two sides of Rastafarians. I think one is like kind of more lenient, and one is like uber strict. And he's the uber strict side. So like he doesn't eat pork. He doesn't use any type of like no vanity, no curse words. This guy's a great guy. He's an awesome, awesome dude. One of the most purest people ever. But that's how he views his life, right? He doesn't cut his hair. Like he's a very strict person in this. Would definitely get the shirt off his back to a stranger if he did, right? Like he's just the sweetest guy in the world. But to that point is that I think people need to start taking accountability and like if they have a goal, like, hey, I want to be the best X, whatever it is, manifest and do it. Like you're the only one that's saying you can't do it now. Like there's different. I mean, there's exclusions, right? Like if I want to be the best marathon sprinter and I'm a paraplegic, right? Probably not going to happen, right? Of course, there's outliers, but like for the average common man like us, who's relatively healthy, relatively young, we live in the greatest country on the planet as far as opportunity goes, right? I mean, dude, if you want to be something, do it and start now. Right?
Yeah.
The only better time than yesterday is right now, right?
Whether
So
you think you can or you think you can't, you're
you're
right.
right.
And that's the thing, because we're our own worst enemy in a lot of different facets. But psychologically, if I don't think that I can do something, and I either need to face that and figure out what's preventing me from thinking that I might be able to accomplish this, or break it down into smaller, more achievable steps. But if I don't think that, I won't be able to do that. An exercise that I used to do with athletes in acrobatics is, just quick thought experiments. Like I love like the relativity thought experiments and everything, because until you can conceptualize it, you don't encompass the understanding of it. But I would tell them, if there was a skill that was kind of getting in their head or something like that, I would say pretend you're close your eyes and you jump out of a plane, and maybe that's like a full in, full out, something like that, full double full, whatever, a double backflip, you know I say, if you were an astronaut and you were floating in zero gravity, or you jumped out of an airplane, like, could your body perform these skills? Could you like psychologically see yourself going through that? And that's a win right there. And you can capitalize that on that and continue to build on that, because like in gymnastics, we break down a skill into a million different ways. Like we're space monkeys, by the time we go into outer space, I've done each different part of this lift off, landing a million different times in a million different ways. And I've been thinking about building on success, success, success. There's a great former trampoline coach nationally, and he would make all of his athletes do 100 repetitions of the same drill before they would move on. So it's got to be perfect. It's got to be psychologically, it's got to be there, because I did a stint in that NASM program as a sports psychology professor, and it was really great to go into all of the like theory training there, and apply that to these very small instances that are just moments in training or competition, where someone has a problem and you need to figure out a way to get them to think that they are bigger than their problems, because that's really where it starts. And then you can help them along the way. You can help them create the framework for, steps to achieving that. But they've got to think they can do it. You've got to think you can do it. Tony Robbins says you can have anything you want if you ask intelligently, and it's like, thoughts and prayers. To use that analogy, asking intelligently under what the way he conceptualizes it is not thoughts and prayers, but how do I do the good works in this world to create the framework to, maybe it's gun control in schools or whatever, but like, how do I ask intelligently if I want to be that best boxer? I get up every single day and I hit my road work and I do my training and I'm going to these things and I'm getting my ass beat by the right people in order to learn from those experiences. And then I can put myself in the position to achieve that thing, you know? Um, but you've got to take ownership of that. You've got to break that down, and you've got to be able to kind of put that into the seat where you are right now, and build next steps from it.
Yeah, I completely agree. So I'll actually use that as a segue because I know you do so many things, but there's a couple of things that you do that actually have a lot of interest for me, and I want to touch on. So we've already covered you're elite gymnast, right? You're dominant in that sport. You're a pro fighter, Are you still gonna come back, or you done? Do you think?
No, I'm done. So we
That's what.
actually filmed the last one, and it was a good thing. I don't really have anything to prove, and I never really wanted to do it as my main pursuit. I've always thought if people remember, like, oh yeah, when I die, like, oh, Shaun, and he was a fighter. I think that, at least insofar as, for nothing, just going and punching someone, I think I will have done it wrong. But my father, when he was a professional high diver, et cetera. I had his last professional trampolining competition at 35. And when I got back into competing as a kid, I had a brother who passed away. We sold our gym. I gained 100 pounds between like fourth and fifth grade. And I took a hiatus. I could always tumble, but it wasn't something that, I was training. So when I got back into it competitively as an athlete, when I was coaching, I thought, when I'm 35, I'll hang up, my tramp pants and hang up my gloves. And I thought that was a very, it always sounded like it was good to me. So I've always been really comfortable with it. Turning 35 at the end of the year. I'm getting married at the end of the month. I don't want to have any CTE because that's not what my fiance signed up for.
Right.
And yeah, I think it's time for me to at least professionally put that in the bag. I've, flirted with it. I got some good offers after what I was like, this is my last fight. And then it was like, you want another belt? And I was like, oh, maybe I want another belt. That's I could beat that guy up. Um, but to everything there is a season, and that's kind of where I sit at this. I think I've gotten all that I really wanted to get out of it, and I think that I've put on a couple real good shows for some fans out there.
I definitely think so. I loved watching your stuff. The energy. I mean, I only watched for the backflips. Like, win or lose, I don't give a shit what you did. I was there for the backflips. I'm just kidding. But the energy you brought to the octagon, the showmanship you brought, which is half the battle, right? You can be a good fighter, but if your showmanship sucks, nobody gives a shit, right? But your showmanship was excellent too. So I loved it when you fought. So if that's a chapter that you think you're done with in your life, brother, I hope it's a book that you might close for now, but you'll open again someday, maybe an exhibition style, whatever. We won't ever hold the future. We never know what it holds, right? So that transitions to me, like, so I know you're doing a couple of different things now. Obviously, you're an entrepreneur, kicking ass in that category. I know that you are being featured in some films as well. Um, you know, I think the entrepreneur conversation is probably going to lead us into a majority of this conversation. But just a quick tidbit, I would love to hear more about some of the feature films that you're doing. I know you've been working on this probably you probably got involved in maybe 2018 or so, and you've kind of been kicking some ass in that field since then. So tell me more about that.
Something like that. So it came about really organically. Art imitates life, life imitates art, and we're, I was working with a former film professor who was very, very motivated in film. And so he was working on a project for a long time. He's probably a bigger MMA fan than I am, and obviously a bigger film guy than I am. And he was working on, at the time, it was a feature, and then it was kind of broken up into like more of a segmented situation, but he was making a program about John L. Sullivan, who was the first glove boxing champion in the United States when it was kind of illegal. They were like gloved versus ungloved, and they would have to have fights on like boats and things like that. Um,
He's the original bare knuckle guy, right? That's who he was.
sorry.
He was like the poster child for the bare knuckle stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah,
This one, the
yeah,
overly
definitely.
lonely man. And this is Nathan Karimi, Gung Ho Productions here out of St. Louis. But
Great, great.
so it wound up being, so I'm a professional, I wasn't a professional at the time, but I'm a cage fighter, and I would grow out this handlebar mustache. And, you know, it's a little bit of a shtick. And when I was in that role, I was a sales manager. And from the second I got into the role, I set a task for the team. I'd say, when we hit this task, I'm going to shave my head. And it was a high expectation. And when I said it, I didn't think we'd ever hit it. Or like, I was like, man, if we hit this, I'm doing a victory lap. Um, and so I said it for like 9 months, maybe a year. I was like, and if we hit this, I'm going to shave my head. Like they all knew it. They knew if we ever hit this, Shaun's going to shave his head. And so it was actually the day I was leaving to run American Ninja Warrior in 2019 in Cincinnati. I get hit by a car, break my skateboard on the way into work. Gotta work, go to work. The team crushes it because I come into work. I'm like, I don't know. It was electric that day, and so I was like, I'm not going to shave it before I'm on national TV. So I got done with Ninja Warrior. I shaved my head, and I had this big mustache. And I did a little, I took it for fun. I took a little side by side of the Tom Hardy Bronson poster, and a couple people saw that, and one of them being Nathan. And so, like kind of cagey about the talks for a little bit. And he's like, what, experience, if any, do you have in this? But it's like, I grew up doing the talent shows. We would always do skits at the gym, skits for demos. So I had no lack of familiarity there. And then I was in like the improv troupe in college, et cetera. So when the opportunity came up, I was like, yeah, listen, we would try out for the Muni every year as kids. So I'd love to take advantage of the opportunity. And I got to play the protagonist, John Sullivan, in this film. And it's really rolled. I've done a number of other ones. Just speaking specifically to Nathan, he's doing a film festival coming up, premiering a number of different films, but one of which being it's called Oscar Tango Hellwater. I play Push Broom Mustache, Sheriff John Waller, and that's a production I'm really excited about. I'm hoping this writer's strike wraps up, but in this position, like if somebody optioned it, that would be cool. But as a result of that, I got into some other things. I did like a fashion show here recently, and you're supposed to be like really cool. And I was about to take my first walk on the runway, and the woman who's hosting it goes, "You think you could do that flip?" I was like, "You think I can do this flip?" And I was just hamming it up the rest of the time. It was very lit. But I got into one of the other guys that I work with really heavily. I've got a couple projects coming out. One where I play a villain. I'm always cast as a bad guy for some reason. Trying to change that, but apparently I play a real good heel. Um,
And
so
that's so crazy because, like, for you to be typecast as that, because you're the sweetest, nicest guy in the world. It's so crazy.
Bruiser. That's a funny one, and maybe a story for another day. But with this guy, he did 11 seasons of a local TV show, then got into some short films. So, um, I got to be involved in some of these, and we've won some international film festival awards. And now we're in production of that director's first feature, and it's neat because that John L. Sullivan thing. Both my brothers got to be in it, and this one, both my brothers get to be in it. My older brother, I guess maybe not quite spoiler alerts, but you get the picture. My older brother, he passes away. My little brother, he's older brother's widow's bodyguard, and then I'm the FBI agent that comes and saves the day. So I've had to do a little bit of filming in police stations here recently, but I'm excited for that one. That should be a cool feature, and the director's taking a really good run at it. I've also done some like silly ones. I was just in like a raunchy Christmas horror movie. So I was filming Christmas stuff all July, and it's just an interesting thing. I've cut that off because this summer I've just been filming all summer. So I haven't accepted any roles, but I'm supposed to go to a table read today. So I'm like, all right, maybe I'll play Joaquin. Because it's a cool opportunity. It's fun to do, making horror films with your friends or whatever. And it's really enjoyable. It's an experience that I've gotten to see aspects of the industry and gotten to take some part in some really cool projects where I can, say that's cool. I'll tell you, as far as like my goals with that too, like I achieved all my MMA goals. I'm like, I want to make one thing that feels impactful, that feels cathartic, where I can feel like I portrayed or represented something that is, an experience through film that I feel proud of, that I'll want to show my children. And right now, like I do some comedies and stuff like that. So we're building towards that, and I don't know what that project will be, but maybe once I finish that project, I'll wrap up the film stuff.
That's great, man. I love to hear it. It's just I love to see you progress in that category, man, because like it's so cool to see like you're doing all these really interesting roles. I know Nathan Karimi, he's a great guy too. I'm sure you and him get along. Like best buds, and I'm sure he's very diligent when it comes down to it. But so I'm actually curious. I've seen and this might just be my negligence here, but I've seen like clips and whatnot that you guys have shared and whatnot. But where can people find this stuff that you've done?
Oh, I mean, everything with COVID, everything's streaming. Like, you can find like Tubi or Apple TV, anything like that. I could drop a couple like that. That one was called Strong Boy, where the Oscar Tango Hellwater is the one that we're in. The King Christmas one's called Triple Xmas. This I've been in Bonnie Conway PI, Schmetterling. That's the one where I play the murderer. This most recent one coming up is called Rio Rules the World, and they're all over like Tubi, Apple TV, Amazon Prime, stuff like that.
That's excellent. Cool. I'll definitely have to check some of those out, man, because I'd love to see you in action. Obviously, I know you're talented in that category. I've seen clips, so I know you're validated. But I'd actually love to see the whole plot instead of just an awesome clip.
The
So what
chase
about
scene. I did want to touch on too before we move on from film, just because
yeah?
like it felt really natural and organic. But so Nathan approached me with an idea because he we talk. I said, this is going to be my last fight. I'm going to be done with it. I'm going to move on. So he said, I've got an idea. And he's a big Stanley Kubrick fan. And some of that is
Who is
featured into some of the things that we've done. He's arguably one of the best filmmakers ever. And
100%?
early in his career, he did a short film called Day of the Fight, where he followed and documented a fighter and his brother who were going to go fight in Madison Square Garden, and then he films the fight. And so we did pretty much a shot for shot remake where we're going through this, and it's me and my brother. So it was like, oh, this is really organic, but it's a really cool little slice of life. And then we've got the pay-per-view cameras. We had 3 different film cameras for the fight itself, and I guess you gotta watch that one. But that one's an
Absolutely.
interesting ending. And then 2, because there are plans for how this is going to wrap up, but it's true to life. And one thing I like specifically about this project as it is kind of coming to fruition is, it doesn't necessarily glorify fighting in that, there's people put out like, hey, your Facebook, you're going to put out your highlight reel, stuff like that. But it's a slice of good authenticity that is just really, hey, win or lose, you get punched in the head.
That's a good point. That's a great point. I mean, that just sounds incredible, man. I'm actually really looking forward to this. I hope the table reading that you do today does well because I'd love to see more things. I just think as far as quality goes, man, you knock it out of the park, and I think you know you have a. I mean, there's no reason why if we talked about it earlier, if Shaun Scott wanted to be the best actor in the world, there's no reason why he can't do it. You know,
I
so
like to try and be the best actor for that scene while it's rolling. And I don't know, like, a bit of, I'm a bit of a Stanislavski. So I'm a method guy, and I try and just think, what would this person do? Or like, obviously if I'm in a role, I'm in a role where if it's a bruiser or whatever, I'm like, how would this person think? And it's funny because, this is the role, this is what goes on paper, this is what's in the director's head. And it's really cool working with people who you can have a really creative environment. And I'll say like, this is what this character would be doing because this is what he's thinking, because this is whatever, or like I'll create these backstories for all of my characters.
I love
And
that.
sometimes it's funny, I'll be like, yeah, Sheriff Waller does this, he came from Arkansas, came up here with his wife, then she passed away, or it's dumb stuff like that. And the director's like, I didn't write that. And I'm like, no, but it's canon now. I thought it up. Like, it's not going to make it into any like lines or anything, but this is where my motivation comes from. And it's
I
fun.
think you're doing that,
Just go
Sean.
through it.
Adds such. I mean, I'm sure other actors do that, but I've never heard of that before. Such a great idea. You're just adding more dynamics to the character, and then in return, what I'm sure you're actually doing is allowing yourself to feel those emotions correctly because based on the backstory, I not that I've ever acted before. This is the closest thing I'd probably ever do to be on film. God bless. But I play a lot of video games in my spare time. A lot of RPG games where you can kind of do what the hell you want, open world. And it's gonna sound really cheesy, but I always like that. I always like to build my character a backstory of like why. Like let's say I build them to be this guy, do this, do that, right? Be good or evil, whatever. I always do a backstory because it just makes the game more fun, right? And in acting, I'm sure it makes it more fun as well because like you said, let's say you're playing this guy from the backwoods of Arkansas. A wife died of yellow fever, and he got abused by his dad, so this is why he acts this way. Like dude, that's That's such a crazy fucking dynamic you add to these characters. That makes not only the characters more interesting, but it allows you to act out more proficiently because you're feeling that raw emotion that you created. So like you're living, you're part of the story because now you're feeling it internally. I love that, man. I
It's
don't know
super
if there are any.
fulfilling as like a creative endeavor. It is funny though, because I'll be like, you know, this Agent Huckabee has a little bit of a Nashville accent, and the director's like, no, he doesn't. He's like, less Nashville.
Like, yes, he does. He grew up in Nashville. You just didn't know it, sir.
You don't know the backstory.
That's so good,
Agent
man.
Ken Huckabee, he's got justice on his mind.
Oh my god! Or every once in a while, he has that southern twang that he kind of grew out of, but certain words will come and play it out.
Mhm.
I love it, man. I absolutely love it. Oh my goodness, that's so cool, man. I'm so happy to see what you guys do. Going on forward, you and Karimi. It's like I'm just blown away. I can't wait to watch them, man. I'm so pumped for you guys. Um, how did you? So I know that Karimi's, kind of approached you and all that stuff. So you're dominant in it, yes, and I know you're confident. Can you kind of share with me a little? Because I have no idea how that works. So I'm just curious. How do you kind of prepare for those roles, right? Obviously, we know you create a backstory, which is not always true, but now it's canon, which is sweet. But how do you kind of prepare for those roles? Let's say your upcoming role that you have, like what is the kind of like mental preparation? What are the physical preparations you do? Is there anything crazy or is it pretty straightforward for you?
Well, the director's like a cheat code because I say, "What's the motivation for this?" Or like even when you're doing it, film. So having done theater, theater is a straight run. That's a one take. There's no take backs.
Right.
You like everything's memorized going forward. Film is kind of like cheating, because you got a director to tell you how to do it. You can take multiple takes, one for safety. They don't roll film anymore, so it's all digital, and it gives you the luxury of, all right, we'll roll a safety film and we'll get a couple extra takes of something. But it's really interesting because like each, we're going to do a close up, we're going to do a wide, we're going to do this perspective, we're going to do that perspective. So by the time in film you're done doing a scene, it feels real because you've done it in that instance like 20 times. And it's I don't know. I know I don't know. There's a lot of different aspects that you have to kind of incorporate to become someone who can do something like that. You got to read your lines. You got to make sure you're coming correct there. You got to make sure you've got continuity with, characters and everything. I'm about to shave this little Spanish and then let it grow scruffy for filming Sunday. But it's just a ton of little things, and you got a lot of help because there is a lot that goes into film, because they're thinking about the lighting, the stage composition, the editing, how comes together. And so you have a lot of people helping you with, okay, and your hand was this way, or and that cup was that way, whatever. And I wish, it'd be nice if that were if it were like that in life, like cut, like Shaun, do it this way again. And it's like, all right, I'll crush it this time.
100%.
But yeah, that book though is called An Actor Prepares, the Stanislavski method acting book, just talking about the psychology of it, which is interesting, and it's something that I've incorporated into, because I'm we all kind of play this role of ourselves, and you have to, when we're talking about self-actualizing, like what do I want to be? Who is Nate? Who is Shaun? How, what does this character do? Like, what do I do? Is there something that would be interesting to do or to accomplish, or a scenario to get myself in? And I walk myself there all the time. Before I went into the cage, because there was a point it was like, you know, I had to come to the realization. It's like, oh yeah, I'm a fighter. Oh yeah, I'm a professional fighter. Like all of this stuff, and I'm not a mean guy or anything. But before I walk into the cage, I'd slap the mat going in. This is why I'm here. Let's go. You know, and you just have to live in that dharma. When I walk onto a stage to give a speech in some capacity, I'm there because I'm the person who was selected to be there because of, I can't discount any of it. I've taken the steps to be the person who's going to be in this role, and I'm just going to say the lines. It's there for me. All the world is but a stage, and we're merely the actors. So, Theocritus said, "Play well your part, and there all the honor lies." So, whatever role that is, do it.
I love that, man. And you said very early in the conversation about imposter syndrome. I think we all feel that from time to time, right? Even the most qualified individual will have that self doubt. And what you just said is like you're there for a reason. You were selected for a reason. Everything is kind of playing to that factor. If you're going to be in that position, you're blessed to be in that position. Do the best of your ability. I think that's huge, and I think a lot of people might struggle with that. I know I do personally. I was always doing very well in the sales category, be top of the rankings for whatever. But sometimes I feel this like, dude, I'm fucking terrible. I'm
Right.
not doing this. I
Like,
should.
how am I beating them? Like,
Right.
no. If not you, then who? If not now, then when?
100%. I completely agree more. I read a lot of Stoics. Have you ever read any
Any what?
like of the Stoics?
Oh yeah, the Stoic questions every day. My older
Yeah,
brother, he'll like, we kind of text out the workout, so we're all on, try to be on the same program if possible, just to have that group of, hey, we're going through these shared experiences. But he'll send out the Stoic questions pretty often,
yeah,
and in terms of life, it's a little bit of bend like the grass that you do not break, but also you got to be the rock the storm breaks on sometimes, you know.
yeah, definitely. I just discovered them. So I've always been a decent reader for the most part, at least in some capacity. But really, in the last year, I've read a shit ton of books, more than I've ever read in my life. And I came across the Stoics earlier. I was like, I see a meme every once in a while, or something taken out of context or paraphrased. And I was like, I'm actually gonna do some research. So now I'm reading Marcus Aurelius Stoics.
Meditations, baby.
Oh yeah, man, it's so crazy. And just
If you
thinking
can pick
about,
up Meditations and then Plutarch's Lives, you're pretty good there.
yeah, dude, you can't go wrong. I mean, just a lot of what you're saying is pretty much like their philosophy, right? So I was curious, like, this guy's got to be familiar with it quite a bit because like a lot of those perspectives and phrases that they share, right? It's so mind changing on how you can just change your whole perception of thought. And at the end of the day, too, like just being in the moment, a lot of it is what you said, right? Just being in the moment and being aware that you're in the moment and doing what needs to be done. I think a lot of people lack, and for whatever reason, I'm not sure why. I'm not the best answer here, but yeah, man, I love how your views on life emulate that, and obviously, man, like I know anything that you do, Shaun, I know that I'm confident that you're giving it 100% of your time. So I just want to say, from an outside perspective, man, I appreciate it, and I wish more people, including myself, could kind of embody that as well.
The thing is, they say like hindsight is 2020. You really don't know a lot of times where the path leads, like where all these tangents go. When you accept that first fight or that first role, you don't know where it's going to lead, and you have to kind of open yourself to that. So we're getting married. We're doing a honeymoon, and I I think we found that we like the cruises because there's a lot of stuff for me to do, but there's also a itinerary that my very lovely, diligent, detail-oriented fiance appreciates. And so she's a data scientist. She pulled out a big spreadsheet and everything, and she was putting up our options like, hey, we can do a 10-day, like we can do this and this. She wound up, with an ounce of preparation is worth a pound of cure, right? So she applied herself and she found, this great trip that it winds up being, we're doing two back-to-back 7 days instead of one 10-day, if we can price it out. And we wind up staying on the same boat, but we're doing a ton of like Greece and Cyprus and everything. And she was like, oh, and it goes to Jerusalem. It spends 2 days in Israel. And that's, I guess, not the typical honeymoon destination. But when that became something that, because nothing is an option until it is, right? But then when I was approached with that, I was like, I'm gonna go to the Wailing Wall and the Sea of Galilee, and I'm gonna, try and walk in these places and have these experiences that, I'm open to changing me. Like in the Motorcycle Diaries, Chase says, "Let the world change you, and you can change the world." So I'm like, that's a cool opportunity. I get to go to the island where John had revelations. I get to go to, like see where the Colossus of Rhodes was and everything, and that's so neat in terms of broadening your experiences, you know. And two, like sometimes it's rough. Like I'll get up and I'll work from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., 7 days a week. And, I'm just doing stuff. So it's hard to like, hey, take a vacation or anything like that. But they say that travel just destroys your biases, because you get to see these people in these different cultural contexts and these different experiences that you can have personally. But two, you don't need that. That's not like a barrier of entry. One of my favorite quotes is, "True discovery lies not in seeing new things, but in seeing old things with new eyes." And people a lot of times don't appreciate what's right next door, or right across the street, or right in front of their face. And and that's really where the environment is. So maybe we go on these experiences, but we have to take them back. Like, we have to bring them back into the relationships that we have with our friends and our family, and we have to bring them into our environment. It's something, like, uh, we just did like Amsterdam, south of France, etc. But we did Mexico City, and I tell everybody, like, "Oh man, there's so many similarities between Mexico City and St. Louis." And
Yeah.
I've told that to some people, and they're like, "No, what? Are you kidding?" And I had a great conversation last night with an anthropologist who did her master's down in Teotihuacan, and she was like, "Yeah, of course. I'm surprised more people don't see it." A communal perspective, and the way that we had the our St. Louis had the Mound Building Society. It mirrors the Teotihuacan Society, and granted, they still have indigenous natives, and we don't really have indigenous natives from Cahokia, but some of the reverberations I kind of see parallels. And that's all to say, I wish we had more street trucks in St. Louis. Like, couldn't you imagine it walking down Market? It's like, boom, $2.
Absolutely. So I'll tell you a couple things that you touched on there. Like, so I have a good friend of mine who actually is similar to you in a lot of the ways. I love him to death. And
Well,
he uh, he traveled to South America last year, about a year and a half. Like, he just saved a bunch of money and like live. You can live in Mexico for I think like 80 days,
you can stretch a
and
dollar.
yeah. So he would come back, live there in an Airbnb for 80 days, fly back for a week, go live there again for 80 days, fly back for a week, go over there and live for 80 days. So he lived in Playa del Carmen, he lived in
Under your
Cancun.
visas.
Right, exactly. And then he lived in Mexico City for his last stint. And he lived in the American side of Mexico City. And people don't realize this, but Mexico City is actually higher elevation than Denver.
Mhm.
So, it's fairly nice weather. It's not like a desert, right? Mexico is so diverse and it's beautiful there. And, some people have these ideas of Mexico being unsafe, which certain areas are, but same here in St. Louis. Certain areas of St. Louis I wouldn't like to go to, but he loved it there. He met a lot of great people, and the experiences that he had there were crazy. So he was telling me about it. So my fiance and I, we were like, so I was to give you perspective, right? Like, I never traveled much until the last, I'd say, 3 or 4 years. Never left the country until last year. Never went and saw my first concert until 2 years ago, right? So I was a very like vanilla human being, right? And went to Mexico. We went to Cancun for 9 days, or something, man, and just like the perspective of being somewhere different and meeting those people who are,
Yeah, you got to get off the resort.
yeah, I did. That's what I want to do. They were like, "Hey, don't leave the resort." I was like, "Fuck it, I'm leaving the resort." I'm like, "Listen, I'm a decently fit, intelligent guy. I can figure it out, right? And if I die by somebody, then so fucking be it, right?" And we got in some sketchy situations. We got in some sketchy situations, but the experiences that I learned from those situations, right, were life changing for me, right? So like, we spent a lot of time in Cancun. They a little bit off of the resorts, kind of more towards the city of Cancun. They have this Mexican flea market, and it's all tin shack stacked on top of each other kind of deal. Really, really cool.
The
And
barrio.
it's so cool, man. It was awesome, and everybody there, super friendly because they want money, and I get it. But like, also genuinely, they so my fiance, she has Puerto Rican, and she speaks Spanish very fluently. She did like 6 years of Spanish, went to Spain for studying abroad, all that shit. So she speaks Spanish very fluently. I can order nachos and cheese from Mexican restaurants, so I speak no Spanish. And my fiance had a cut on her. She bumped into something and got a little scrape on her. And there was like 7 different vendors came up and gave her bandages. Like, it was very, very big deal. And I was like, if that happened in America, nobody would even look twice. Nobody would give a shit. So I thought about it. I was like, man, these people are, and I'm sure there was some monetary goal behind that. They wanted us to come buy from their shop, whatever. That's cool. But I could tell genuinely, like, a good portion of their actions were like, oh, this person is hurt. We need to help them. Like, we need to, and like, this one vendor would go to the other side of this shopping center and get a band-aid from this vendor. And then this one vendor went to the other side of the shopping center and got like alcohol spray. Like, they were all working together collectively to like help my fiance with what it was, a band-aid to solve,
That's
right? So
humanity, man. Yeah,
it's
that's
that.
good stuff. It's funny. I don't know. There's a lot that goes into that, and two, to be in a different environment, to have that experience, it kind of solidifies that and helps you lose some of your jaded cynicism when you come
Absolutely.
back. You know, they say never attribute to malice what you can attribute to ignorance. And the same thing, like if somebody does something nice for you, I think, you know, that goes back to the psychological question: are humans inherently like good or bad? I like to lean on err on the side of good because, you know, you get burned every so often, but if you don't open yourself to those experiences, you're missing out on that 9 out of 10 times when someone's just going to genuinely want to connect or contribute or is grateful or appreciative of an interaction there.
Yeah.
So, like, you know, going to China, getting paid by the Chinese Communist central government to do a Guinness World Records out there, I was like, Derek, we got to get off this base. We got to go, you know, go get a little slice of life. We got Shanghai in Shanghai for a night. Um, but it's funny you were talking about in Mexico City. So when we were there, was in May this year during the International Women's Rights March. And
Nice.
our hotel for the conference was right on the strip up to the presidential palace. And, you know, they're going to have the march in front of there. And my fiance's, you know, looking at it, she's like, well, there's supposed to be violence against men. Men are not supposed to be in the street, but it was right out in front of the hotel.
You had to go.
So of course I'm going to, you know, walk out and check it out because I was watching it as it was going. It was like, I mean, the millions of women, and in retrospect, very few men, like almost zero men whatsoever. They were advising the men to stay off the roads, but they put up barricades and partitions like they were preparing for war, like 14-foot high barricades, and the women were spray painting everything. It was super gnarly. I loved it. The like energy that they had, and I'm in support of those things. I'm very egalitarian. I caught some heat from some of my family members, but TG Masaryk, the uh, founder of a unified Czechoslovakia obviously doesn't exist anymore, but when he got married, he took made his wife's maiden name as a second middle name as a show of egalitarian support. I'm going to do that. So women's rights march comes up, you know, Contu, and I wound up, you know, meeting some people, and there's, you know, marching. So I was like, all right, I'm gonna start walking with these people, you know, and as much as I can, try and be in support and solidarity with them. However, there was some live music that was happening, so I kind of like let the people who I was with go, and then I'm, you know, just a big guy in a crowd of these people, and they're posting up posters of like, this man's a predator, this man, like a lot of not good stuff, and the men weren't supposed to be there. And um, I should I in hindsight I might have been an observer as opposed to a participant. But so I stopped there and I realized, well, like, oh shit, I don't know any of these people. And there was like one, you know, they're chanting all these things, and I can't understand half of it, but I got to learn at least one of the chants that they were chanting. This woman who was standing like next to me and took notice of me while we're watching this performance, she comes up behind me and she dips her hand and she's got a bucket of purple paint. They're painting everything purple. And she comes up from behind me over my shoulder and she like puts paint all over my cheek. And I turned around and she looks at me and she goes, too macho. And then she like painted the other side of my cheek. And I was like, you know, lo siento, con tu, you know, as support or whatever. Um, but then I realized they had a very specific, like, something da tu macho chant that as I had to then walk against the flow of all these, you know, very, you know,
Passionate.
passionate women.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I realized, oh shit, they're chanting that chant at me, you know, as I'm walking across, and then I'm like fully covered in paint. I was like, this is a very interesting experience, and I had to unpack that bad boy with some local natives as I was going through there. But it was such a neat experience, you know, like their native city Teotihuacan. There, we went and wound up getting a tour with an indigenous native through there, but he took us back to his place. Like we tried some of his tequila, peyote, and then he took us down in the caves where they like the lava caves where they mined all the rock for the Temple of the Sun and everything. And it was so interesting, like being able to be there in these native sacred places. He's like, this is where I lead the sweat lodge, sweat ceremonies. And it's like, this is so, I'm so grateful to have this opportunity to like have this commune with these people and be able to feel like I can, you know, at least have some conceptual understanding of this civilization and community and culture as a firsthand experience and be able to bring that back in the
Yeah,
story, you know?
absolutely. And a lot of that Aztec culture is so rich. I'm a big history guy, as you remember, I'm sure. But I love reading about history, and that whole area has kind of been neglected when it comes to history, right? Nobody really talks about it. It's kind of lost, if you will. And I think information that we have found out, right? It's so amazing just how the whole civilizations worked, right? And like how the Aztec Empire was so vast and just so dominant for so long, right? I mean, they had math, like the Mayans had math before the Romans did. You know what I mean? They had the concept of the Mayas had a concept of zero, and the Romans did. And Rome, I'm Italian, so I got a Rome tattoo for that, but so Rome was able to take over half the world at that point, right? Without the concept of zero. And the Mayans were already studying astronomy, and they were already ahead of their time. That whole area down there was much more intelligent when it comes to ancient history as we think. You said something about the mounds, right? Cahokia Mounds and things. Have you ever heard of the what the hell is it called? Oh my goodness, I'm drawing a blank. Uh, Dryer's theory.
Say that again.
It's called the Dryer's impact theory or Dyer's impact theory. You ever heard of that?
Maybe
So
I just might not be semantically connecting.
yeah. So this is just kind of getting a little out there. So I like just talking about the history of it. So like a lot of these places around the world have what the Cahokia Mounds were, right? There's this place in Turkey called Tibet. God damn, I can't remember the name of it. It's like Tibeki Tepe or something like that. And Mexico has a bunch too. You're talking about these mountains, right? And what it was the whole idea was like civilization has been around forever, like humans, and we've been more advanced than we are now in the past. And then we would have like massive comet or asteroid that strikes and kind of bring us back down to the dark ages, and then we have to rebuild. And what they find is that all over the globe they have these mounds of where people, a couple 100,000 people could stay into some of these events, and that's how they think that back in let's say 15,000 years ago, the Earth was smacked around by a bunch of comets and asteroids. We were this super advanced civilization, and then got brought back to our knees by these things, right? And those sites is where people went to survive those things. They lived in those caves, however long, until the situation was better outside. I just always think very interesting, and they go back to where like all the pyramids that are in Mexico. They're always lined up and synchronized with the pyramids in the Middle East and also in the pyramids in Asia. They're all synced up on a grid. And I've always thought that was super interesting about like how much forgotten history is there. Like human history is like I think only been like 2% recorded, so the other 98% has been just forgotten or lost. And talking about Mexico City, talking about Mexico in general, talking about South America, man, like just experiencing those places. There's so much lost history there that I would love to explore more. So my whole recommendation to everybody out there, man, you have a goal or desire to travel, do it. You won't regret it, I promise.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of threads there that I wouldn't feel comfortable like necessarily being able to tie that in, but there there's a lot of like you said, things that have not been recorded, stuff that we are not privy to, that we don't have the context and we don't have the awareness of. But with some of those topics specifically, like let's be honest, the government is now saying conclusively, like we've got alien biology, etc. And it is a very interesting thing. When you go out and look at the stars, they're looking back, and that's what they're telling us now from an official capacity. So we'll see where that kind of goes. But as far as just those civilizations and the lessons that we could maybe learn from them, the the structure of the family unit and the structure of the community and how we interact in those interactions and personal relationships, business relationships. Those are things that aren't, you know, I know we extrapolate them into like things like the fractional reserve banking system, et cetera, but people get really complicated answers to what might be very simple solutions, um, because we a lot of times make problems for ourselves when if we could try and find similarities with our neighbors or with our business adversaries, we might be able to work together collectively. That's what I really like about, specifically out here in St. Louis in the Mound Building Society is that is a massive earthworks project. Like you're talking about the pyramids. That's something where humans had to come together for a stated purpose and all fill a role to perform something and achieve something collectively that we couldn't do as individuals. And there's a lot of power there. And really, the big thing that's keeping us from that is we are identifying with our dissimilarities as opposed to our similarities. We're going as a cybersecurity guy, I'm watching all this stuff going into the election year, and it's two sides of the coin. It's very interesting the innovations that are coming up for malicious actors and people who have motivations that are antagonistic to our state and our communities, however that might be, they draw the lines. And on the other side, it really helps draw people together who have that mindset for trying to take collective action to, you know, create an environment that is not going to be subject to, like you said, disaster. Because it's a legitimate thing. We run into like Cuban Missile Crisis situations. Unfortunately, as far as like our critical infrastructure, um, on a small scale, fairly often at this point. So we've got to make sure that the Halley's Comet keeps missing. Um, I don't know. Maybe we transition into business now. Like, because that I don't know. I think we took that topic and I'm looking at the earth as a pale blue dot now.
Yeah, for sure. And we can transition to business too. For the last part of our segment here, I wanted to kind of make that move. But just some interesting thoughts, right? I mean, and not to sound conspiratorial again for anybody, but these are thoughts and deep thoughts that we should all be at least having, right? So, but
Well,
anyways, yeah, man.
to
So
touch on that, just because, like, oh, the government was telling us, no, these things don't exist. Now they're telling us, no, they do exist. We just didn't think you could handle that as the populace. Like I've been pen pals now with Noam Chomsky, and it's like he's the foremost political dissident in the country for a long time, and he's looking at how are they controlling us with our environment? How are they, they as like deep state puppet actors? But power is undeniable. And when you're thinking about these things, not just in like a political context or a business or environmental context, anything that's not conclusively, proven to be in conflict with something or, you know, proven false, when you're thinking about these hypotheticals, it's like, why can't they coexist?
yeah, I agree with you. And I like Chomsky as well. I think I love reading the old stuff from him that's coming to fruition today. Right? They were like, hey, like you said, they're like, hey, listen, these things probably exist, but like you're just not ready for it. So we're going to condition you by releasing a bunch of alien movies and shit like that. So whenever we do tell you that they exist, you won't be as shocked, and society won't fall apart. So I get that. But to transition before we get bigger and FBI agents off at the house, tell us a little bit more about your career adventure and kind of like what you do and like what you really dominate in that category.
Yeah. So uh, I'll touch on ice cream really quick because I mentioned that I just actually had a profitable exit from my first solo entrepreneurial venture. Crazy Cup, the largest ice cream shop in St. Louis. We had 2,500 square feet. The joke that I would say is my brothers and I, none of us gave my grandmother a grandchild, so I bought her an ice cream shop, and she got to be the grandma for the community. We'd do events, live music, etc., and it was a really neat experience. And just sold to a company called Honeybee Tea here in St. Louis. They're going to incorporate into some like dessert concepts with their already thriving boba business. And I'm really excited to see kind of where they take it. But it's nice that was a chapter in my life, and I get to move forward now. So I currently work as a independent sales consultant, really across the board. I work with a company, a couple of different conglomerates, like they call it the channel sales, et cetera. But essentially, we broker relationships for technology services, and I get to work with some very powerful players across a large berth. Um, my company, Blue Equinox, does like 3,500 B2B IT audits, and I work in telephony and support, and the exciting part of it, where I'm kind of pulling myself more towards, is cybersecurity specifically, just because it is so prevalent. Again, going into an election year, it's crazy the amount of activity that's going on right now. So there's really a need in the market, and I get the opportunity to work with some of the best SMEs in the country. Um, I guess I'll go super high level on how I got into this, I guess, because we worked together. I was a gymnastics coach. I went into sales. Little brother was a sales manager with Abstract here out of St. Louis. I came on, worked up to the position of being a manager of the most heavily like IT dense book of business, and kind of knew that technology was the space I wanted to get into insofar as sales was concerned. And then I got an offer I couldn't refuse by a company here locally. I've got a relationship with two-time Arch Grants winners, Rovertown. They were the largest college student discount program in the country. They pivoted to selling custom applications for convenience retail. Huck's in Illinois kind of twisted their arm, said, "Hey, will you do this for us?" Looking at the data, it was a no-brainer. They pivoted. They brought me on, and it was an excellent thing. COVID was going on, and I was the guy who was selling contactless payment, curbside delivery, push notification engagement, etc. And so everybody left, actually. So I was the only person in the office here in St. Louis, and it came to a point like they're looking at it, and we're closing deals. And the president came in. We had a sauce on the side. We had a nice Four Hands beer, and he said, "Shaun, you can't sell any more apps for like 9 months to a year. We're like, we can't build them fast enough. We need to stop selling apps." I was like, "No, you need a list. Like, we just need more people to help build them." And that being said, like our CTO, I'd been on development floors, like huge development floors, 60 to 100 people, and they're not being able to do this stuff that I've got like one or a couple guys that are crushing it because of the foundational technology. Um, but so I went into staffing here locally, regionally out of St. Louis. But the Great Recession's happening. I'm signing businesses, but they weren't able to fill them. So we parted ways as well, very amicably. Um, and they hired a couple different recruiters to work on those roles. I went to another larger staffing company here in St. Louis called PRI Global. Then they branded PRI Solutions. Um, and they were more of a custom solutions development shop, which was a really neat opportunity that I otherwise don't think I would have been able to walk right into. But I came on in the staffing side, and then before I left, facilitated, a couple of application development projects for the Federal Reserve here in St. Louis. Um, Worked on a national diversity, equity, and inclusion cohort with a company called Splunk. And that's something that, through my Sokol organization and some of my just inherent interests, I've been able to speak on a couple of different panels and try and be involved in that community. We always kind of fall into that trap, but that led really organically to I get to work with that same little brother again, and he runs the biz dev team, and I work in partnerships. So I work in partnerships with IT companies, trying to structure these synergistic win-win opportunities to help as many people as possible. It's like Zig Ziglar on steroids, So I can have anything I want by helping enough other people get what they want. So I run a big old group of guys who say, "How can I help you?"
I love that, man. And I think in the business category, there needs to be more of that and less of the greediness, right? If you were helping feed everybody, at the end of the day, if you need a meal, people would be willing to feed you, right? So I've always believed that. It's you're familiar with Patrick Bet Davis or David? Sorry.
Hmm?
Do you know the guy Patrick Bet David? He's got a podcast, Value Entertainment.
Hmm. No,
He's a
not.
pretty big guy. He's up and coming, but he started a company on the insurance side called People Helping People, and it kind of flows off that same business model. Yeah, and it's huge, man. I mean, like, it's no longer like the reason why I've done well in sales is because I've never believed that sales was. It's not like comeback. It's collaborative. right? Like it's not me versus you, it's us against the problem. And that's
Think
how it has to be. It's like, hey, you have a problem. I'm not trying to sell you a solution that might work. I'm trying to work with you to solve the problem, right? And if I can provide the value and solve your problem, then it's advantageous for us to be partners. But if I can't solve your problem, like if you're telling me, if I own a painting company and you're like, Nate, I want my house painted blue and all I have is red paint, I'm not going to be a good fit for you. I can sit here and tell you why my red paint's better, but like at the end of the day, dude, like if you want your house to be blue, I can't help you, right? So it's not a good fit. So instead of me pushing that envelope and trying to push those clients that I don't necessarily blend with, right? Like I love how your guys' model is like, listen, man, if it makes sense and we can help you, like, we're gonna do it. And if it's not, that's okay too. Because there's enough the pie is big enough for everybody to eat. And people like to think they just need to get theirs. And that's the worst thing about American business, in my opinion, is people are just greedy and they try to push the envelope and really push that agenda instead of just helping people. And that's where, like, you have, I mean, I'm sure you have competitors of some sort in your industry, right? And all of us do. But, the real difference is, it takes one of those companies to make the whole industry look bad. And that's a huge thing. If people were just acting on those morals and practicing the businesses that, you know, we're in it to solve a problem instead of a profit, the world would be a better place. People wouldn't get burnt out or screwed over, and we kind of go from that. So I commend you guys for having that business model, and I think going forward with the way information is shared and processed, I think that's the only way businesses are going to stay alive in our world. To be honest.
Yeah, it's interesting because like that's I mean an offshoot of the capitalist structure is it's that inherent competition. Whereas, especially more recently in the past couple of decades, people are realizing that with like conscious consumerism and conscious capitalism, where they're trying to again do good while doing good, those things make an economic impact. Like these diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, et cetera, like supporting underserved communities, they have a viable quantitative return on investment that otherwise people might not have been able to see because there are a lot of intangibles that contribute to those desired outcomes that when you're looking just on paper a lot of times don't waterfall. So it's interesting, we we are a capitalist society, right? But that within that work structure, like that's a dictatorship, right? The boss says what's going on, or there are a lot of employee owned organizations or collaborative environments where they can create something like that, and that is really where I see things thriving moving forwards because I mean we've got this anti-work movement and all that other stuff, and there's just so much fluff that we could cut out as far as like managers watching our back and oversight and meetings that we could streamline. It would be a beautiful thing, I think, continuing to like idealize efficiency. Like how are we impacting this person's life, the person who's actually there? What value do they create? That's a huge thing, being chained to a desk or a computer while you're sitting there scrolling Reddit is a lot less impactful than saying, hey, these are the objectives that I want you to accomplish, and then just figure it out, and if you can get it done in 2 hours, do it, and then go catch a hog in the river. um, and that's something that as a human really helps us celebrate ourselves and be very authentic, and then really build up the other individuals around us because people want to be good at their job, people want to contribute, people want to feel fulfilled with this. And if we take it from the perspective of we need to force somebody to fit into these holes, they will, at some point they're going to rebel against that, and we have to kind of work with human nature to um, get the most out of all of us because we get something from that every time I feel like I've contributed or impacted some person or organization. I feel good about that, and it
Yeah.
and it helps kind of strengthen that muscle to where I want to help somebody else, or I feel that I have the ability to help somebody else, and we could all help each other a little more. It is just very interesting with kind of the world that we live in at this point because the gap between like the haves and the have nots is widening. The opportunities, you know though we may have access to more like education, et cetera, there are still these channels that are inherent within like the systemic um, organization that might need some retooling in the world that we're living in because like I said with the social stuff, a fit, active, intelligent populace is something that benefits everybody.
Of course.
You were mentioning like the Roman societies and the Mayan societies and everything, and how they would kind of come into conflict. Whereas, what was actually going on behind the scenes was they were building on each other's successes and creating something that they could not have achieved collectively, even as these great civilizations. And, they say you can have the tallest tower in town by burning all the others down. But that doesn't give you a very nice place to be. You
Right.
want to be in a situation where you can celebrate your competitor, you know? If the market's growing, great. If we're all moving in that direction, great. If we're finding a better way to interact with it, great. Let's go. And anything that is outdated or a modality that doesn't serve us in this current situation, it's harder when you're not in your skin, in your brain as a individual when we're acting as a collective. But we've got to be able to try and in some capacity break those like systems and process that no longer serve us.
Yeah, I completely agree with you 100%. And like, I want to touch base on a couple different things. One is like, when I first got involved in like politics and having these high depth conversations about the way I think the world should be, I was typically always a right leaning kind of guy. And as I grew up and I realized a lot of the things, I'm more libertarian. I'm more in the middle. Like, hey, listen, we just need to find a solution. I don't give a shit who doesn't. We just got to figure out the solution to the problem, right? Doesn't matter if they're blue or red or green. Wait, right? We got to just figure this out. So, you know, I think a lot of what you said there is so accurate, and I think people nowadays say like the younger generation, like nobody wants to work, nobody wants to work. I don't think that's the case. I think people want to work. They just want to be motivated to work, right? They want to be told they're doing a good job. They want to feel that validation. Like if you want to have people do anything, find a reason why they're motivated and play it together, right? So I mean, I love what you said with your how you guys run your company is like, Nate, here's the objective. Knock it out in 3 hours and then go spend the rest of the day on the river. Who cares? You did your job. You don't need to sit there from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. when you were done at 2 and just do busy work, right? It's just a waste of time and you're unmotivated. Then you have your commute, then you got to go home and the day's already over. So now you got to do family stuff. And then you're just stuck in this rat race continuously of back and forth, Groundhog Day essentially. And it drives people crazy. So there's no motivation there, right? And as far as like everything else goes too in this society, I don't know where we came up with the idea as a society that like for me to do well, my competition has to die. I don't understand where that came from. I mean, I guess I get it. Maybe it's a basic human instinct, right? Like, oh, our tribe wants all the resources, so in order for our tribe to have the resources, that tribe has to die. I guess that's whatever, right? But we're in such a streamlined society for the most part that like it's not that way. You are not competing for the same six buffalo in the field, right? There's a sea of buffalo out there. Me and you could eat like kings forever if we work together, right? And if I don't get a buffalo one day, but you do, I'm going to celebrate your success because I know next time I need help, you're going to be there with the synergy to help, right? And vice versa. I hope that people come to that conclusion in reality that you can be a successful business and help other businesses in the same space. Because you're never always going to be in a position to where you're turning down clients. But if you ever are, and you can send them to the other client, and maybe they give you a little spiff of that or whatever, a referral partnership network, whatever. There's a billion ways to make money in the world, right? And money's not going anywhere, guys. They're putting more of it by the day. So if you feel like you have to drive out your competition to be dominant in your sector, you're wrong, and you're actually doing more harm than good. If in reality, because that your competitor might have the next best idea that you can actually implement into your business to help you out. So why would you shut down the diversity? Why would you shut down the creativity channels that are there?
Yeah, I find myself in this situation, fairly often because I have to be curious about things, right? Like I guess I do a lot of stuff. I had a associate who for a while there was calling me the most interesting man in the world, and I would kind of like, it wouldn't sit right. So I reformulated it to be able to think about it in a way that I liked and could lean into. And I would say I'm not the most interesting man in the world. I'm the most interested man in the world.
I
Like,
love that.
because I say yes, or I like dig into these things, because I try to be genuinely curious here, it leads me to find some opportunity to help, or to find a win-win synergy that we can lean into. And it's interesting because I'll have these conversations and I'll push people to competitor or whatever, because ultimately when I'm creating a relationship, or when I'm trying, that's what's important. We do business at the end of the day with people, not with businesses. So if I can help solidify that, that's a win, no matter what that is. So I need to try and help put myself in their shoes, try and be empathetic, try and figure out with them, my thinking cap on, what's the solution that maybe fits their pain points and helps remediate or alleviate some of those things. And I'll run into conversations because I work in partnerships, and it's funny to say, like, I'd really like to figure out a way that we could work together. I feel like we're overlapping within the community. I have an associate who likes to say, I'm sure there's only 100 people in technology, because I keep running into them. And we as humans, whether I work for one company or another company, I have to feel like I'm operating with integrity, because people take notice of that when I'm in a different role, or when I'm with a different company, or you're with a different role or with a different company. I want you to feel like I've acted honorably. It's like the guys that I fight. We're not enemies. After we fight, I'm having beers with these guys, and you have
Right.
to be able to kind of do that, because there's the dharma of the situation. Maybe we're a competitor in some aspects, but I think that is the beauty of capitalism there, where we're pushing ourselves to be as good as we possibly can to, hopefully win in those scenarios. But if not, that's not something where I'm in a position where it behooves me to act negatively in that light. And I think people are just short-sighted with that. That's why we get into that antagonism. That's why we get into these malicious actors who are going to attempt to create problems for other people, to try and get that sense of validation that they're important. That's from a criminological perspective. When someone brings a gun into an altercation, boom, they are the most important thing in your life while they have that gun pointed at your head. And it's like interesting psychologically to think about that, in that, maybe there's trauma that person went through, that this is their unhealthy way of addressing that Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And it's very interesting. But I wish, it's difficult, because sometimes you get shot in the head and there's no second chances there. But if our first interaction could be like, how do I give this person a hug? How do I try and find a way to identify with them as a human being, as opposed to someone who's I've gotten this conceptual box, where, just to use politics or whatever, it's like, they're liberal. I got to own the lib, or they're a Trumper. I hate them. And it's so sad, because most people stop questioning there, as opposed to, if it comes up, if you're going to dig into it, let me ask you a question. Why do you think that? What about that really draws you to that perspective? And through like two or three questions, you probably find a similarity there.
100%.
And we're the ones who draw these dividing lines. So we can move them, we can change them, we can empathize with someone, even if they're in a different frame of mind than ourselves. Um, I don't know. It's funny. So personally, I was on the organizing committee of Occupy when we had it in St. Louis. It was great. We were winning the World Series in 2011. I was camping out in Keener Plaza every day, you know, running down to the river every morning. And it was that movement really didn't come to fruition, because it didn't have any stated directional goals. And it just kind of pattered out a little bit, more so than anything, as a lack of, you know, leadership. And I was like, I got to do an interview or two then, and I was like, wait, I'm not the guy who's going to be doing this. I'm here to partake in the experience, but I'm not the leader of this movement.
Right.
Um, no, I don't know. It's funny. I was getting to something else, but I just really wanted to say, we all have an impact somewhere, whether it's our local government or whether it's whatever it is. Oh yeah, that's what I was going to say. I just did the Young Republicans trivia night. George Rouse is a Czech guy, and he's a Republican, and I'm like, I don't care that he's a Republican. Like, I feel like he's a guy who will do a good platform and be able to um, represent himself with integrity and hopefully represent his constituents with integrity. Specifically for that guy, I'm sure you've heard of the defenestration of Prague,
Of course.
but defenestration is a Czech thing. Jan Hus got burned at the stake by the Catholic Church. Like the Prague Spring happened, and then boom, the Iron Curtain comes in, just like Ukraine, um, which is a whole nother bag of cats. But like they were fully surrounded by other communist countries. They couldn't go anywhere. They didn't have guns. My aunt, who's a professor at WashU, she was given a speech at our cultural club about like the invasion in Prague Spring. And she was like, and at 12, whatever, like the Soviet apparatchik paratroops into Wenceslas Square. And at 12:30, a group of patriots goes to sing in the square. It's like, well, they're shooting up the art museum. Like the singing doesn't help. Ukraine's got guns, so it's been a different story there. But it's a very interesting, different way to look at these cultural and community phenomena, and these geopolitical things are, we got to find commonalities. We got to figure out ways to work together because we got one planet. We got to live together. Um, and the joke I was going to make about that Young Republicans trivia night is our team was the Blueberries, and I was like, it was just funny, like we're the Blueberries.
That's so crazy. You know what? I agree with you 100%. I think anytime I try to go into a tough conversation that I know I have to have, I always try to start off with commonalities. Like, hey, listen, even in my relationship, if I know we're gonna have a conversation about anything, right? And it can be huge or it can be small. What's the goal here, right? We both love each other. We both care about us. We both want to accomplish things, right? I always start these tough conversations with anybody in business and my personal life with the common denominator of, listen, we want to have the same outcome, right? You want this, I want this. There's a lot of commonalities there. But I think too, if you look at Americans as a whole, in my opinion, the people that are on the left and the people that are on the right, common folk like me and you, like the not billionaires, right? Dude, we have the same struggles. It doesn't matter what political affiliation you are. We're still struggling. We still pay the same price on gas. We still pay the same grocery bills. We still think Netflix is overpriced, right? Like it's all the same problems, right? So instead of like thinking, oh, this person has a solution, or this person has a solution that has just a single solution, right? And being closed-minded, if we just put aside the affiliation and just work together in harmony to figure out these solutions, I'm sure we would get them. I said something on my last podcast last week where I talked about like, I'm not a big fan of Joe Biden by any means, but like he's the pilot of our plane right now. And
It's
if
hard
I'm
to
on
beat
the
that with
plane
the
and
job.
I'm the pilot, I don't want the plane to go down. Like I hope we get to our destination safely, and then maybe I don't fly that airline. It's the same fucking deal, man. Like, hey, he's not really working out, in my opinion, as a president. That's why we have elections. We can vote him out. We can do whatever we want, right? Like, there's a lot of options here, and there's corruption. I mean, I understand that, right? There's corruption in the government. That's cool, but I'm saying for the most part, like, you know, there's a lot of chances here where both parties on both sides of the aisles would just come together. We wouldn't have bad candidates. We would have rock star candidates. We would have qualified people who are. We'd be confident in leading this place, right? So, are
And
you
it's hard to be the guy with the
a
job, right? Especially in today's day and age. If you're gonna run, they're gonna pull into you. They're gonna try and smear you and whatever. And it's like that sucks. When they started doing the presidency, you wouldn't nominate yourself. You would be nominated, and you would humbly, say like, "Oh, if you guys think that I'm the best person for it," but it's really an industry where people can't get into it unless they're in a certain situation. They can't go through. And then no matter what, you're getting a lot of your life torn apart that maybe had you known that going into it, you might not have wanted to do that. And we're not incentivizing people to get in. We're terrorizing people when they get out. It's hard. It's a difficult position to be in. That being said, I told you I'm an Occupy guy. There's one war, and that is the class war, my friend. That's a struggle, and it creates a lot of different problems because there's not like equity and parity across divisions. Again, that haves and have nots is getting stretched, and I'm over here trying to provide for grandchildren, but I'm very, very cognizant that I'm not the only person in this world. If we could, as a community, like, I know taxes are a thing, right? We threw the tea in the harbor for a reason, But like healthcare, I'll tell you a little tea. So my father's from Minneapolis, Minnesota, Twin Cities, Brooklyn Center. My my grandma, his mother, ran for mayor of Minneapolis at one point in time. While she was running for mayor, a guy named Paul Wellstone was running for like alderman, and became great friends with my grandfather. My grandfather drove his campaign bus, um, until he passed away. And he wound up becoming a power broker in the Senate, you know? And so my grandpa's driving his green bus, and Paul, he's, a farmer labor party guy out of Minneapolis. But what he wanted to try and pass was the, any system of like healthcare that we pass for the populace has to match the system of healthcare that we pass for the senators and the congressmen. And ain't nobody in the pharmaceutical industry or lobbies like that. And this is, maybe this is the place to crack into it, but there are a lot of good internet sources if you can chase it to like first persons and interesting context. He like, if you're familiar with Mel Carnahan in St. Louis, small plane went down. Should have taken the bus that day. But he was pushing things nationally that were very progressive, to help us, have health care. And as a former insurance broker, that our healthcare system is wonky. And then we politicize it to where, Romney care becomes Obamacare, and you go from loving it to hating it just based on what it's called. And it's sickening. Um, just kind of the situation that we're put in. And we have like a kind of fight to eat mentality where it's difficult for people to pay for their medications, to get to access healthcare, or to have healthy foods because the lobbies don't want it, the corporations don't want it. And we sit in, like, even bringing it back to like our health and fitness, we wake up and every single day are bombarded by advertisements that, you know what, they don't want the best for us. They want us to consume their product and in mass quantities like the cone heads. And even if it's a health oriented product, they don't want the health outcome. They want you to continue to be in that state of striving for that health outcome so you can continue to be a consumer of their product. And it's like, I was saying, he who needs little can have all he wants, because it helps you be contented. And that's something where like you psychologically just have to wrap your head around. I don't need this. I don't need this. I don't need this. I don't need this. And it helps create space in your life for what could be, so many meaningful things. Um, you know, like I'll fast once a year, and it's an exercise for me. I just won't eat for 12 days, just little lemons and cayenne pepper, some Senecott tea at night. But I've got enough resources here. We've got enough resources to be able to accomplish the things we want, and provide and sustain ourselves. But for some reason, that greed and everything just bleeds into our life. I'll tell you. So this is another story that I like to tell. I told my father about this story. We worked in insurance. He's still a gymnastics coach. He's got a couple international athletes at this point, and is head coach of the trampoline and tumbling program here out of St. Louis. But when I was a kid, my parents owned our gym, and then they sold it. So when they sold it, my dad, for the first time in my life, had a job where he was a wage slave. He was trading time for money, and he got a paycheck in the mail. And I remember I was there, and I was so curious. I was a very annoyingly curious kid. And I said, Dad, how much is your paycheck? How much did you make? Like, how much is your time worth? I was trying to like gauge this in my adolescent mind. And he kind of shook it off. He's like looking at it himself. He didn't show me. He said, it's enough. And I was like, all right. I just kind of let it stew. And then I waited another month, and I was there. He gets his check next month, and I was ready for it. And I asked him again. I said, Dad, how much is your time worth? How much did you make? What's your paycheck? And he said it again to me. He said, it's enough. And as an adolescent, that was very impactful to me in that whatever that number on the check was, it was enough. Like we had enough he could provide, and whether that was a large or a small number, it was superfluous in the extent that maybe there would be some small changes based on if that number is a big number or that number is a small number. We might have to tighten our purse strings or whatever, but it'll always be enough. And that mentality was something that I was able to incorporate and kind of move forward with, to where you can be stalwart in, okay, I'm going to make this job change. Okay, I'm going to take this risk, and I'm going to be able to live with the outcomes because I'm okay with the outcomes. There's not an intended or positive or negative outcome as a result of this. It just kind of is what it is, and I get to move forward from there.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think as Americans, we're indoctrined to be that consumer, right? Just consume, 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 and keeping up with the Joneses is an Americanized creative thing, right? Like, why is it a competition of like who's got the nicest car on the street? Why does it fucking matter? You know what I mean? At the end of things, at the end of 5 years from now, that car is going to be worth a fraction of what it is, and it's going to get you the same place that my Honda Accord did or whatever you drive, right? I mean, I drive a Ram truck, right? And it's not the nicest truck on my street, but it gets me to the same place as the guy that has a dually down the road, right? And it gets me to the same place as the guy that has a Chevy S from 1999. It's the same. It's the same road we travel on, fellas. Like as long as, honestly, as long as you have four wheels and you have AC and heat, you're okay. Like you know what I mean? Like it's all right, right? So I agree with you 100%. I think we're indoctrined that way to be that consumer, and that story with your dad is great because he could have said the amount, he could have bitched about it's not enough. He could have been like, oh, this isn't this. We need more. But the fact that he knew, like, oh, this is enough. This is enough to provide for what we need to do, right? And I think that's a really humbling experience to always be that minimalistic person, right? Like, as Americans, I feel like we always strive to have the biggest and best, which is cool, I guess, to a certain extent. But like, come on, man, like, at one point you have to kind of realize like you don't need everything, and the man that has everything truly has nothing because he feels nothing because he's not happy, right? He's never going to be content with his internal because he just wants more and more and more.
You can't take it with you.
That's right, 100%. So I've, growing up in a impoverished kind of family, I was like the part of my first person in my immediate family to graduate high school, first person in my immediate family to make six figures, right? So like, it's a big deal and a big honor for them. Like, I was younger, I had a good, I made my first six figures when I was like 23, right? And I would just piss away money. I would go out and buy shit that I didn't need. And as I got older, when I'm 27 and I'm more conservative in that regard, like the fishing pole that costs $200 catches the same fish that gets $40.
Yeah.
So like you don't need those things, right? And like I think a lot of people need to put that down. And I think social media plays into it, and the media, and a lot of other factors play into it. But being happy with what you have, being thankful for what you have, holds a lot more value, in my opinion, than the other, the latter. You're right there, brother.
Yeah, I got like my I do a lot of the face wrinkling, so I put on like a fucking lotion. And it's like straight up in my eyes. I'm like, oh, that's terrible.
I dig it, brother. Well, I'll tell you what, man, I know we're getting close on time. We're about to you actually might be the longest episode yet, which is awesome. So, Shaun, do you want to leave us with a final thought, and then we can kind of wrap up?
Well, we touched on it earlier. So when I ran, and we are online, we try and create some community. But when we officially incorporated as like the Scott Health and Fitness brand, my brothers and I, we trademarked "Be Your Own Superhero," and that's something that has had parallels in my life. I've seen it in a number of different aspects, and I've spoken to that extent with other individuals. It's like, how do we build other people up and create an environment that we want to be in, and how do we be who we want to ourselves? Like, because let's be honest, like the people that coach who was hard on you, he cared about you, and you realize that now. But as a man, as an adult, as in life, nobody cares about you. Everybody's self-motivated. The grand majority of the people who you run into, if you don't find a way to establish a legitimate connection and humanize that organically, nobody cares about you. And nobody cares about what your hat or your car looks like. Nobody cares about how much money is in your bank account. And we kind of have to do that for ourselves. We have to be our own superhero. We have to give ourselves the freedom and permission to do what we are going to want to do that's going to be fulfilling for us, and be able to kind of roll off whatever anybody else thinks or whatever anybody else might have, you know, don't anything that wouldn't be like detrimental to the other person, right? Like libertarian, as long as we're not infringing on each other. I don't care. Wear a banana suit and rollerblade to work. I don't care. Fulfill your function. Figure out a way to add value there. Figure out a way to improve your own circumstance based on identifying what that is, breaking it down into steps to hopefully overcome or achieve that, mitigate it, whatever that might be. And be your own superhero, because we're all, the Rastas say we're all gods. I like to say we're all superheroes, and we all have a superpower, and identifying that superpower, or building that superpower, training that superpower, making it impactful. That's our goal in life, right? We have to figure out a perspective and find meaning here.
Yeah, and that's definitely a beautiful way to end this, man. Be your own superhero. I think that's a message that needs to be broadcasted more. I appreciate you and your family and brothers for creating that and leaving that legacy with all of us. And man, once again, thank you so much for being here with me. I appreciate all that you do, and please keep being the most interested man in the world.
Appreciate you, Nate. Have a great rest of the day.
You too, brother.